On today's episode of the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast, Maxwell Baumbach and I are previewing the 2025 Champions Classic matchups between Kansas and Duke and Michigan State and Kentucky. We're also going to wrap up and we're going to talk about some of Maxwell's quick hits for the week from this edition of the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast.
You are Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings, your daily podcast on the future stars of the NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast your first listen of the day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcasting network. I'm your host, Nathan Grubel, No Ceilings contributor, basketball scout, and consultant over the last 15 years. And joining me, as always, is my co-host, founder, creator of the No Stone Unturned Ceilings series for No Ceilings, is Maxwell Baumbach. Maxwell, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. We keep getting deeper and deeper into draft season. And I feel like for me, the true signifier that we are fully back in college basketball is the Champions Classic. And I cannot wait to dive into these matchups.
As Maxwell said on today's episode, we're previewing the 2026 NBA draft prospects that you need to know about while watching the Champions Classic. We're going to talk Kansas and Duke. We're going to run into a little bit of Michigan State and Kentucky, highlighting one of Maxwell's prospects he wrote about this week for NoCeilingsNBA.com. And then finally, we'll wrap up with some quick hits about prospects who have impressed him over the first few weeks of college basketball. Before we get started, I do want to make sure to highlight an excellent episode from Tyler Rucker, Tyler Metcalf about AJ DeBance's electrifying game against UConn over the weekend. And if you missed last week, it was Mock Draft Palooza here in the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast feed. We went through our Mock Draft 1.0 for the season, so make sure you go back, listen. If you missed any of those episodes, they're all available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Maxwell, as we talked about at the top, Champions Classic time. This is one of my favorite events of the year. I love telling the story. I was at the very first Champions Classic in Madison Square Garden. That was when Anthony Davis, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, and those Kentucky boys faced off against eventual champion in Kansas. That was a championship preview at the end of the season. That was such a fun game, such a fun environment to be at. And I expect nothing less from this year's edition of the Champions Classic. We have Kansas for Duke, who that's the second game of the night, but it really is the headliner in terms of prospects that we're expecting to see. We have gotten some buzz over the weekend that Darren Peterson for Kansas may not be suiting up in this game. We have no official confirmation on that, so we're not trying to break any news here, just trying to make listeners aware that they may not get to see him in particular. But what we will get to see is our #1 prospect currently in the 2026 NBA draft process is Cam Boozer, forward for Duke, 6'9", 250 pounds. Starting off the season incredibly in terms of his stat line, 22 points, 10 rebounds, chipping in virtually everywhere you could possibly imagine from a production standpoint. He got a little bit of flack for his performance against that Texas front line, did not shoot well from the field, but really bounced back in the second half, got to the free throw line consistently, and all across the game. He was a defensive playmaker, an awesome passer, a force on the glass. And that's really what Cam Boozer's game is. He does a little bit of everything for you at Duke. And I want to take a few seconds here, Maxwell. There's been some buzz on social media that Cam Boozer isn't necessarily a top flight prospect in this draft class, which, listen, I understand everyone out there who wants to have someone else #1 between Peterson, AJ DeBance. Like, I understand that completely. But there's just this notion out there that Boozer might not even be like a quality role player in the NBA or like a quality starter. And to me,
wild.
I find that a little wild because every single game that we've seen since Texas, he has been utterly dominant. I think he had like a 20-plus point double-double of like halftime against Indiana State or something crazy like that. Like, this dude has been churning out awesome game after awesome game. He's one of the best winners we've seen in the United States come up as a prospect in recent memory. He has all the accolades. He has all the championships. And this guy, he is a leader, and I think he's going to put on a show for Duke in this game against Kansas. Who else are you looking to see? What do you want to see from Cam Boozer in particular? What are you looking for this matchup, Kansas versus Duke?
Yeah, well, I think the front court matchup as a whole, now that we're removing Peterson from the equation, is what makes this game so interesting. So with Boozer, you said it extremely well. He's been unbelievably productive at every level. He was productive in the 2 scrimmage games, which suddenly everyone forgets because he had one bad game against Texas. And by bad game, I mean a game where his shots didn't go in the first half. Oh, no.
Yeah, right.
I think people are over-indexing on the fact that he's not an elite run-jump athlete while ignoring the fact that guys like Nikola Jokic, Alperen Şengün aren't necessarily elite run-jump athletes. When you are big and you are strong and you are really skilled, you can find ways to make things happen on a basketball court. And I think Cam Boozer is on an excellent pace so far, going 65% of his twos and about 36% of his threes on high volume, and nearly 80% of the line. I think everything is there. But I do think this is a very interesting test. And I think the Kansas bigs in particular have a lot to prove here. Flory Badunga, has long been a guy that a lot of, especially analytically driven scouts, have wanted to kind of flaunt and move up boards. A little bit undersized for the center position, listed at around 6'9", but he's always been an excellent finisher. Through 4 games, he's making 76.3% of his field goals. He is a great shot blocker. He's blocking 2.5 shots per game. The question with Badunga to me has always been like, is there more? Because if you're an undersized big, and I don't know what the wingspan is, maybe the wingspan is going to be so great that he's not actually undersized. But if I see a guy that's 6'9", I need there to be other things that are popping up. I need there to be some ball handling, some passing, preferably a jump shot. And we just have not seen that out of him. And not that there's anything wrong with a Dembona per se, who's carved out an every night role, but a player like a Dembona isn't as appealing in this modern era where there's so many big men that can do so many things with the ball while still bringing energy and rebounding and defense. So I think for Badunga, it's a very interesting test to see if he can show a little bit more. I think for Bryson Tiller, it's a chance for him to show that there's a little bit more to his game than just, hey, if you leave me wide open, I can knock down some threes. And I think for Patrick Ngongba on Duke, it's a shot for him as well. I think I've been blown away by how well he's passed from the perimeter so far this season. That's always been a strength for him. But I think with these 4 guys that have varying degrees of draft buzz, with Boozer where it's at the top, Badunga usually in the second round, and then for Big Pat and Tiller, we're talking about them more as, margins guys. In Tiller's case, Pat gets sort of that late first, early second attention quite a bit. I think there's a lot at stake for these guys because a lot of NBA front offices are going to want to see what they look like on the floor with other talented bigs. For Pat, is he going to move and jump as well? For Tiller, is the defensive juice there? Is there more to his game in Badunga's case? For Cam, how are you going to look when you're up against another big, long, strong guy like Tiller or a guy like Badunga who can jump out of the gym but also has the feet to slide with you on the perimeter? Like he just hasn't faced a lot of these guys yet, and it's going to be really exciting to see how it plays out.
So I think for a few reasons, Duke is in position to win this game, potentially win it fairly handily. And I'll tell you why. So obviously we've been watching these teams first few games. We've gone back, watched some of the tape. It's also looking at some of their synergy profiles, in particular, looking at Kansas as a team. Listen, they've been awesome. I think they're rated excellent on both offense and defense so far up to this point in the season. But some weak spots for Kansas in particular would be in transition and off cuts. And I think those are 2 big areas where Duke can shine in particular. We talk about Cam Boozer as an interior scorer, a finisher, someone who's also shown off some 3-point and shooting versatility. But one of his best skills is as an outlet passer and getting this team going in transition. You have an awesome transition shooter on the wing in Isaiah Evans. You have a downhill finisher who can really fly up and down the court in Dame Sarr. You have someone else like Caden Boozer who loves to push the pace. And then a lot of these guys can also cut in the half court as well. And I think that's going to be an area where Boozer in particular can hurt them. And then you talked about it is a big game for Flory Badunga and Bryson Tiller in the post on the Kansas side. But guys like Cam Boozer and Pat Ngongba, they are awesome at utilizing their craft and their footwork on the block. And I feel like they can get those guys in foul trouble and knock them out of the game a little bit early. Because somebody like Badunga, you outlined all of his physical tools, which are outstanding. This guy is a superb athlete at the college level in the front court. but he can be prone to falling for some of the foul bait at times. And I think someone like Cam, I think that's going to be his go-to, because Cam isn't this explosive post scorer in terms of I'm just going to all of a sudden rise up and dunk over you. That's not his game, but he is very crafty. He utilizes shot fakes, ball fakes. He can finish with either hand. He has the footwork to do so. So I'm going to look for that matchup in particular. Can Cam and Gongba get some of these guys in foul trouble? And then how does this game play out in transition? Is Duke able to utilize some of that speed, that athleticism? One other guy I do want to call out for Kansas. He hasn't gotten off to a good start this year, but Cole Rosario, the 6'6" freshman, is someone who want to pay attention to how he can impact the game offensively. I have some questions if he's actually 6'6", to be entirely honest. I'm gonna find that out, because I'm gonna be on the court with them, the Champions Classic, Madison Square Garden. So I will find that answer out. But just wanted to throw his name out there as well. Someone who could get hot from 3-point range, is an exciting athlete in transition, can throw down a slam dunk. If Pierce isn't playing, I would expect Rosario to get a nice bump up in offensive usage for the Kansas Jayhawks. When we return to the Locked On NBA Draft and No Ceilings podcast, Maxwell and I are going to discuss Michigan State versus Kentucky and highlight a prospect Maxwell actually wrote about this week for No Ceilings. Promise, we didn't plan that one, but sometimes things just work out that way. Stay tuned. If you're a business owner, here's the truth. SaaS promised to make work easier, but now the average company is buried by hundreds of apps that slow down your teams and simply don't work together. That's not SaaS. That's SAD, software as a disservice. That's why you need Rippling. Rippling is the unified platform for global HR, payroll, IT, and finance, all in one place. They've helped millions of businesses replace a mess of disconnected tools with one system designed to give leaders clarity, speed, and control. Whether you want to run your entire HR, IT, and finance operations as one, or just fill the gaps in your software stack, Rippling can do it all. And right now you can get 6 months free by going to rippling.com/LockedOnNBA. Learn more at rippling.com/LockedOnNBA. Rippling.com/LockedOnNBA for 6 months free. This episode's brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of the sports season. Whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both, there's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere Prize Picks operates, including in California, Texas, and Georgia. I've been using Prize Picks during both football Sundays and NBA tip-offs. It keeps every game exciting. I like picking my favorite players, like Tyrese Maxey on the Philadelphia 76ers, to see how my predictions play out. The new Stacks feature is a game changer. Listen, I can now pick more on Maxey's points, threes, and assists in the same lineup. Not a bad bet on most nights. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, their injury reboot saves my lineup from a loss. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's so good to be right. Welcome back to the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast, part of the #1 sports podcasting network, Locked On, your team every day. Maxwell, Michigan State versus Kentucky. This is your time to shine. Again, like I said, I promise we didn't plan this. It just happened to be that Maxwell's prospect overview column lined up perfectly with what we want to talk about this week. You highlighted Coen Carr for Michigan State, specifically 6'6", 230-pound wing. Why don't you walk the audience through why were you thinking about writing about Coen Carr this week? Like, what led you to that? And then B, how do you think he can potentially impact this game? And what does his case as a prospect really say about, how exciting this matchup can be?
Yeah. So the why behind Coen Carr was partially, I was really excited by what I've seen on tape from him this year in terms of a skill development perspective. But I've also just increasingly watched more and more NBA. to help myself as an evaluator. We talk about like keeping that bar high and setting those expectations for prospects and making sure that you're watching what you're projecting to. And I thought some of the trends that we've seen in the NBA this season are particularly interesting with how Coen Carr plays. So for those unfamiliar, Coen Carr is a 6'6" junior at Michigan State who's listed at like 235 pounds. He's built like a tank and he can jump out of the gym. Last year he had 62 dunks, which is the third most by a 6'6" and underclassman going back to 2008. 97th percentile in transition frequency, 90th percentile in transition efficiency. He is a guy who just finishes everything above the rim. But what I love about Carr is that it's really started to lead to half-court functionality this season. When he drives downhill, he's looking more confident with his handle. He has some counter moves, but straight up, he's just going to shove you backwards. He is going to get through you. When he gets through you, he will still jump up and dunk over you. Made a center-like 68.8% of his half-court rim attempts this past season. But he's also really shown the ability to pass. Michigan State's always had these really capable, smart, savvy point guards. They still have one this year in Jeremy Fears, but in the past, he'd had an embarrassment of riches. They'd have like 4 or 5 of those guys every year.
Yep.
This year, it's just Fears, and that's allowed Carr to show off a little bit of what he can do as a passer. So far, he has a 22.3 assist rate. He's had at least 2 assists in every game. He's making these really sharp on-the-go deliveries. So now he's a guy that because he's so big and so strong and so fast, he's going to force help when he drives. When the help comes, he's figuring out how to punish it. And he just has this frame that isn't fair, that most people are not born with, that most people could spend their lifetime in the gym and not develop. And then defensively, obviously, he can guard a lot of positions to point of attack. That speed that helps him in transition, helps him in defensive transition, helps him to cover ground. And when I look at the NBA this year, do I wish that Coen Carr could shoot threes? Like, absolutely. Unfortunately, I don't think he's going to be a good shooter.
Sure.
But when I look at how much of NBA defense has been predicated on stopping teams from getting out in transition and how much more valuable that makes players who can help you get out in transition, I think about how teams have crashed the glass more, like we've seen in Houston, in Detroit, in New York. I think there's a lot of value to that. I think his ability to, if he can see the floor and just drive and go in a 5-out offense, Michigan State hasn't used him yet as a roller. We're seeing increasingly more screens from non-centers. And if you are trying to guard a pick and roll with a 3 and Coen Carr's rolling to the basket, I got bad news for you as far as how that's going to work out. I just think that there's a lot of stuff schematically that if he continues to pass like this could be valuable, even if this guy is a non-shooter, because he's so athletic and so strong. And now we're starting to see how smart this guy might be. And I'm fascinated by him. He's not a guy where I'm like top 20 right now, but I think he's really, really interesting. And I cannot wait to see him on the floor against a very smart, deep, loves to run, physical Kentucky team.
Everything you talked about in terms of where the NBA game is going now. I mean, you and I have plenty of conversations offline about trends and things that we're looking for specifically when we're scouting. We've done a whole podcast series on this very feed about topics like that. And the pace of play, the full court pressure, particularly on defense, is a very interesting call out. We saw that heightened to a ridiculous degree in the finals last year between Oklahoma City and Indiana. And then we started to see more of it in the NBA Summer League. Like when I was out in Las Vegas, that was a common theme I was seeing, was the number of guys who were consistently picking up full court. So much so, I remember texting one of my good buddies in Coach Tom Crean. And I was talking to him, like the number one thing that I've seen from Summer League this year is this trend of being able to pick up full court and then in turn create and transition off of a lot of those steals and deflections that are being created. That's a big theme that's going into the NBA. And he agreed 100%. He's like, yeah, Nate, I've seen the same exact thing. I think we're going to keep seeing this moving forward. And we are. We're seeing it already in the NBA. We're seeing it trickle down into the G League with different lineups that are being tossed out there. So it's important to have those guys who can guard multiple positions on the perimeter, but most importantly, pressure ball handlers either as soon as they cross the half-court line or close enough to it. And someone like Carr, he's such a powerful athlete, like you talked about. Like guys bounce off of him. It's not the other
Mhm.
way around. And he can really impose his physical will on defense. But then offensively, all the different ways you talked about utilizing him, maybe as like a short roll passer or a cutter, someone who can hit another guy when he's getting downhill off the move. Though that's a very interesting part of his game that's being fleshed out because it gives him NBA utility. If he's not shooting the ball, chances are he's going to be more involved in a motion heavy offense, somewhere where he's not just sitting in the corner waiting for the ball to kick out to him. Is he going to make that 3-point shot or not? The way to utilize him is as a downhill force. And I think we've seen a lot more motion offenses come to light in the NBA today. And I think that's certainly a spot where Coen Carr can impact the game at the next level in the immediate term. In this game against Kentucky, you talked about how his passing is so important given the lack of riches in the backcourt for Michigan State. When I was looking at some of these team synergy profiles, like I was calling out, right now, Michigan State's rated in the 18th percentile in terms of half-court offensive efficiency.
Yeah.
That's not going to get it done, Maxwell. So
Nope.
To your point, if Jeremy Fears, and to Jeremy Fears' credit, he is an exciting point guard prospect, someone who I think
like
we're going to
him,
be able to monitor over time. Brother of Jeremiah Fears, who's right now in the NBA for the New Orleans Pelicans. He has his plate full in front of this Kentucky team, but if you can get passing from some other guys like Carr, it's going to benefit the rest of the team because the rest of this Michigan State team is filled with guys who need a pass to them in order to excel as play finishers. Guys like Jackson Kohler and Carson Cooper in the front court. These are big men. Another guy, Cam Ward, who's going to be coming off the bench for them. Exciting freshman forward, 6'9", 230 pounds. These are all guys who primarily are post-up threats. And so you need multiple guys who can either get them entry passes or when they're rolling or cutting to the basket, you need someone who can get them the ball. Coen Carr has been stepping into that role for Michigan State, something I want to see from him moving forward. On the Kentucky side, I really do just want to quickly touch on two guys in particular. Otega Oweh, 6'4" guard, 220 pounds, has been on the no ceilings radar for multiple seasons now, but I really think where the NBA is going for a lot of the same transition reasons we've been talking about with Coen Carr, Otega Oweh is another one of these guys who is a dynamic athlete at his position on the break, is certainly not afraid to mix it up, get in on the glass, make some of those secondary reads and passes. His jump shot, if it can go in consistently enough, he starts trending more towards like a potential top 30, top 35 territory.
Absolutely.
If it doesn't, I still think he's potentially in consideration in that range because of how good of an on-ball defender that he is. And then Malachi Moreno, the freshman big, 7 foot, 250 pounds, he's going to have to step up for this Kentucky team in particular without Jaden Quaintance, another prospect we've highlighted, still out to injury for Kentucky. But Malachi Moreno, another freshman big, 7-footer, can catch lobs, great finisher at the basket, has been protecting the rim for this Kentucky team. If Kentucky's going to win this game against Michigan State, they have to match their physicality on the interior. They have to be able to play a fast approaching game, and then they have to take advantage and make a lot of the 3-point jump shots that they're able to get on this Michigan State team to really make sure that Michigan State, not being a good half-court team on the other end, if they're not drilling their shots, they're really going to be able to create a big lead in this one. So that's what I'm looking for in this game in particular. When we come back to the Locked On NBA Draft and No Ceilings podcast, we're going to wrap up by going through some of Maxwell's quick NBA draft prospect hits from the first few weeks of college basketball. Stay tuned. Your ambition just met its match with Robinhood. You play for the win, not just on game day, every day. Locking in on every opening, beating your PR, and beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and EFTs, options, futures, and crypto all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends Advanced Tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself, expect more from your money. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Let's be real. Making excuses doesn't solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress. I'm tired. Or it happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support. And that's where Rougiette comes in. Rougiette.com offers fast-acting, doctors-prescribed treatments for ED designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Rougiet makes it easy to get started. You just connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online. No awkward waiting rooms, no in-person appointments. If prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly straight to your door. The process is fast, simple, and private. And it's all handled by real doctors. It's about confidence, connection, and getting back to the moments that matter. Visit RUGITET.com/LockedOnNBA to get 15% off your first order. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNBA. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnNBA so they know we sent you. Rougiet, stop making excuses and start making moves. Thank you for making the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast your first listen of the day. All right, Maxwell, your quick prospect hits from this week. In case the listeners aren't familiar with how your column's generally structured, you're going through a main section in the prospect overview. You're hitting on some quick hits. And if you're a No Ceilings Plus subscriber, you're getting a bonus at the very end with Maxwell's expanding big board. We're going to save that for the paid section of the column, but we are going to go through some of your top quick hits on this last segment. Here's some Maxwell. Who's the first prospect that really stood out to you over the last week and a half in college basketball?
Yeah, Aday Mara from UCLA, who's a guy that internally has driven our collective a bit mad over the years. Aday Mara is a 7'3" big man, came over from Spain a few years ago, started at UCLA, and was just kind of lackluster. It was one of those things where he wasn't really getting the run, and then he would play, and then he'd play and be hyper-productive sometimes, but he couldn't stay on the court for more than 4 minutes at a time. It was just a really frustrating experience as a whole with Aday Mara prior to this season. But the numbers always really liked him because he was really big. He finishes everything inside. He blocks a ton of shots, and he can make some really nice passes. We saw him have an excellent performance against Wake Forest last week. He played 37 minutes. He got up and down the floor well. Offensively, his catch rate is just everything is right at the rim for him. Defensively, it's really hard to play around a guy who is that big and has like a degree of lateral agility. And then offensively, I just always love the passing. His length gives him an ability to generate angles that so many big men just cannot generate. They can't throw the ball from where he's able to get his arms to, and everything's on the money. It's accurate. It's precise. Kind of got punched in the mouth the game after that by TCU. So it's going to be really interesting to sort of see where he ends up settling in. But I thought the Wake Forest was the Aday Mara that we all dreamed of and like a lottery level prospect in terms of how he performed in that game. How are you feeling about Aday Mara these days?
I agree. That game was certainly a spotlight into skills of his that I really didn't necessarily know that he had. Like, we know that he's a 7'3" dominant finisher around the basket, can be someone who's blocking shots, rebounding, but I did not know he had that much latent passing ability. And I know a lot of it was just quick zip stuff, but still to see him rack up some assists on top of all the other ways in which he was producing, I think it really helps out that Michigan team in particular, because that offense can get a little stuck in the mud sometimes. And so if you have another guy like Mara who can make passes out of the post and keep things moving within the flow of that offense, I think it's going to benefit not only that team in the short term, but I really think it's something that NBA scouts going to keep paying more attention to in the long term, because we keep talking about it with big men, that passing skill, the ability to not just put the ball on the deck, but if you play the center position, you can get away a little bit in terms of being more of a play finisher, getting away with doing things on fewer dribbles. But that passing ability, especially if you're doubled in the post, is so important for offense in today's NBA. So where that was the one thing that really jumped out to me on the tape for him. I agree. Great call out. Who's your second call out for the week?
Coen Carr from Baylor, who was like a really hot name coming out of high school a few years back. Never really panned out for him at Tennessee. Transfers to Baylor, and man, he's been great. He's 6'5". He's super smooth with the ball in his hands. And that was always the thing with him, is like he's really smooth. He can really shoot. He can make plays. But I thought what was particularly interesting was just like the overall motor and physicality that he's playing with. He's rail thin. He is rail thin. He's like
listed at 175 pounds. Yep.
Yeah, he's skinny and he looks like he is. But he plays super physical. He was crashing the glass against in their high major game that they played against Washington. He's drawing a ton of fouls. Like, he's living at the line. If the body gets there, like I don't see why not. He's long. He's smooth. It's all functional. He can score at multiple levels, and the dude's tough as nails. Like I sweat physicality and size as much as anybody. But if you're going to play like that, I think it can work.
I agree 100%. You mentioned the free throw rate being up for Cameron Carr early in the season. That's a big call out, but also the smoothness to his game when he's hitting those pull up threes, man. It looks so pretty, and he's definitely a guy who I want to continue to keep an eye on at Baylor alongside another prospect we like, Tunde Esufu. Who's the last prospect that you have? And for listeners, this is where Maxwell really gets to cook. These are the names when he brings them to the table. I'm being dead serious. These are the moments where people have to pay attention, because Maxwell, he'll give a lot of these names out, and chances are they're going to start rising up draft boards in short order. So you want to make sure you're in first by knowing about some of these guys. Who's the last prospect you want to bring to the table, Maxwell?
Josh Omojafo at South Florida. This is a name to watch. So I did a preview column on all the big games watching week 1. I thought there was a premier mid-major matchup between George Washington and South Florida. I list a million guys on both teams. I don't list Josh Omojafo, who ends up being the best player on the floor in that game. Here's the rundown. The man is 6'5". He's listed at like 200 on Basketball Reference. He's got to be like 210, 215. He's big. He is strong. And he has been a bulldozer so far. He is getting wherever he wants on the floor. He draws a ton of fouls, but when he goes downhill, he's got those slick passes that he can make. He is a great shooter. Ball gets out of his hands fast. And last year at Robert Morris, he hit 38% of his threes on good volume. Defensively, because he's so strong, he can guard a number of positions. He was all over the boards. He had 3 steals and 2 blocks in that game against George Washington. And I thought, you know what? I'm looking at the priors from Robert Morris. This is a guy that was like a negative BPM player. Like, this is probably just a one-game thing. He's been awesome in every game. We are now 4 games in the season. He's averaging almost 26 and 4 with 2 steals and 0.5 blocks, 60.5% from the field. Obviously, he's not going to shoot 54% from 3 all year, but he's 90% the line on 7.5 free throw attempts per game. Like, this dude is there physically. He plays like his hair is on fire, and he's clearly skilled. Like, Josh Omojafo is a dude, and I would start to put him on your radar. Who knows, what the eligibility rules are. It looks like he wasn't a D1 player prior to his time at Robert Morris, so Lord only knows what the NCAA is going to decide there, but this dude can hoop.
If you can go on a 60, 50, 90 stretch for 3, 4, 5 games, whatever it is, that is so hard to do at any level of basketball. So please make sure that you're paying attention. Josh Omojafo could be a massive sleeper for USF. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, go find Locked On Fantasy Basketball, where Josh Lloyd hosts the #1 fantasy basketball podcast, giving you daily tips and helping you win your league, all while making you feel like a smarter NBA fan. Find Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, thank you all for listening. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week.